Hello, I'm Paul Rocco, and you're listening to RePrint, brought to you by the Temple News, your in-depth look into the stories you need to know about. TUalerts have long been a source of confusion for students, so I speak to Assistant News Editor Nurbanu Sahin about what goes into TUalerts. Then I speak to Assistant Features Editor Mike Nonnemaker about his 2024 Temple Activism Year in Review. You and Chief Copy Editor Valeria Uribe wrote, I feel like this piece is kind of a long time coming. It's a discussion that happens around campus all the time, kind of about how TUalert works and what the process is behind that. Just tell me, a simple rundown of, how they decide what gets a TUalert and what doesn't.
Yeah, so the Department of Public Safety kind of has their own guidelines. I think there's three things that it really has to qualify for, and it's that it has to be on campus. Second thing is, if it's not on campus, it has to be adjacent to campus. And if it's not any of those, then it has to be on property that the university either owns or somehow controls. So those three things have to occur for it to qualify as a TUalert. All calls that officers respond to get alerted to the department, and there's was it a commander? There's someone on call that looks through these and decides if it's immediate enough to send out an alert. And then if it is, there's, I believe, before issuing the alert, there's John Fry has to be evaluating it, or Ken Kaiser, or Vice President of Public Safety Jennifer Griffin. They evaluate it and they kind of decide, yes, maybe, this needs an emergency notification, or no, it doesn't. So it's kind of confusing to think about, but it's got to qualify for those three factors. Someone's got to alert one of those three people, and they kind of decide, okay, this is immediate. We'll put out an alert immediately. Yeah.
So, you guys kind of start the story off talking about some incidents that were not reported during winter break.
Yeah.
Was it just that those incidents didn't meet those requirements? Technical difficulties, but we're back. So now you can answer that question.
Yeah. So over winter break, we noticed that I don't know if a lot of people follow it. The Temple University Police Association is the police union for the officers on campus. A lot of them would post advisories about to avoid this area, and it's I think one of them was the Cecil area, 1112 Cecil B. Moore, if I'm not correct. Sorry if I'm not wrong. And but there wasn't a TU alert put out for those, and it kind of just had us thinking, is that not in the area? What happened there? So we kind of went through to qualify as a TU alert. They have to be immediate, an emergency, and dangerous to the livelihood of the faculty and students on campus. So we kind of looked through those, and one of the incidents that we referenced was there was an unfortunate murder on a home in Diamond Street. It's not exactly in the patrol zone, but it's near university. But because it was a past incident, it's not immediately, an emergency. It wasn't put out as an alert. It was just put to the Clary crime log, which the Department of Public Safety manages. They update it every day. It's a location of what something happened, if it's still being investigated, and basically just a brief description of what went on.
Right. Speaking of the Clary Act, that's what it is. That is an act that you guys mentioned where colleges are required to report crime that happens on and around their campuses to the community. I was wondering if there's, what kind of requirements there are, or if there's any enforcement for universities to do that. So, could they just do the bare minimum of a social post, or do they have to have a system like a TUalert kind of thing? What does it look like?
The TUalert is something that is just Temple founded. The Clary Act, it's based off of an unfortunate case in the 90s, I believe, a murder of a college student. So now, because of that, colleges are required to report any rapes, murders, assaults that go on campus, robberies, anything like that. And the way Temple does it, aside from the TUalert, an immediate urgent response, there's also, at the end of the year, the department releases their yearly report, and in that there's a whole few pages dedicated to the Clery Act, how many times they've had to respond to a murder, stuff like that, on campus or near campus. And Yeah, the act just requires them. It's not bare minimum. I think personally, based off of that report, the department does report things that they don't have to report. So there's good utilization of that. But it's just for like anything murder, unfortunate assaults, sexual assaults, robberies, and stuff like that have to be reported. And that's a requirement for every single university in the country.
Okay. And is there like a requirement within the act of timeliness in the reporting of it? Or could it be like they just kind of have to put out a report like yearly maybe? Like the bare minimum kind of thing?
I'm not sure if it has to. I'm not sure about the timeliness. It has to be reported. And I think the crime log is for that purpose. So like if students do want to find out about it, they can look it up and it's like public access there. Even if like, the call is made to the Philadelphia Police Department, the Temple Police Department has access to that, and they can like send an officer there, or they can just update that information onto their log. Right. So it's just I'm not sure about the timeliness. That's something I have to look up. I don't think we needed to look at it for this article. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's just immediate things that have to get reported, basically.
Yeah, and you also mentioned how the Temple University Police Association does their own kind of reporting. How does their process of what they pick to report to on their social media kind of differ from TUalerts?
So I think we'd spoken, Evelyn actually spoke to the member of TUPA, and we were told that they report every single incident they respond to the department, and the department decides if a TU alert gets put out or not. Mm-hmm. In times that the police association thinks something should be put out, they kind of just do their own social media post. Mm-hmm. For their followers, because a lot of students follow those pages. It's kind of, they just, think like students should avoid the area or just know that something happened there. A lot of the reason that TUalerts don't have anything more than like a brief description is they want people to avoid that area, that there doesn't need to be like a full description, because you don't want people to go over there. Right. You just want them to know, like, just avoid the area, we're there, we're responding, and then like a follow-up alert to be like, okay, we're out of the area. So, yeah, it's just like their own kind of thing. They just want, if, the department doesn't post about it, they want to post about it, they just go ahead and post about it. There's, like, no requirements for the police union specifically. It's just whatever they want to post.
Yeah. You didn't mention this story, but I'm curious if you guys talked to the university about this at all, or if they ever mentioned in the past. What is their take on TUalert alternatives? Like, obviously the Citizen app is extremely popular among students. Yeah. 2 years ago, it's inactive now, but there was Keep Us Safe TU, which you mentioned both Citizen and Keep Us Safe in the article. Does the university see TUalert as a superior option to those kind of alternatives, or what did they say?
I can't really speak to what the university says. I think they, this is just like a volunteer thing that they put out. They want to alert students. They also have the TU Safe app. A lot of students that, Val interviewed, and there's also the data that came out this week about what students think about public safety. A lot of students think that the TU alert isn't enough, or it comes out later. I think in the article we referenced, like, someone was in the area of a shooting and then the alert didn't go out until an hour after. Yeah. So a lot of students rely on Citizen to, track it, because it's much more like, it's kind of like a bystander alerts each other kind of app, whereas the TU alerts goes through like a system, because they can't just do it without any policies. But then again, a lot of students have said, like, the Citizen app kind of like makes them paranoid, so they prefer the TU alerts more. It's kind of just like, it depends on the person you are. Are you like a really paranoid person, or are you a person that just wants to be like, okay, I see this, or like you're intrigued? Sometimes those Citizen alerts have really interesting.
I get very curious sometimes.
I think one of them was like a woman wailing at like 5 a.m. So it's like really interesting ones. But yeah, it really depends on the type of student you are. Some people don't really care that much for it, but a lot of people know that the area that Temple is in is not always the safest. Yeah. So it really depends. Yeah,
for sure. Do you have anything else on this story?
No, I'm just glad we did it. I think it was something that was always in the works. Val had been working on it for a few months, but I'm glad to see it pair with the data story that Ava did. So it's just a good information for students.
Now I speak to Assistant Features Editor Mike Nonnemaker about his Temple activism year in review for 2024. You wrote a story about kind of your review of student activism on campus for 2024. Tell me about the three organizations that you feature in this story.
Yes, so we did student activists against sexual assault. So I spoke to Ray Epstein, the president, founder of that organization. She's also student body president.
Right.
She does a bunch of stuff. And she gave me a great interview. You know, she talked about, you know, what inspired her to do it. Like her freshman year, coming into it, she knew she wanted to be involved in that. But that organization was actually like defunct for like 3-4 years. I think 2017 it stopped. So she actually started it back up. She reached out to the like faculty advisor that was still on the books and was like, "Yo, I want to get this going again." So she was able to start it back up. I thought that was awesome.
Right.
And they won like, I think 2023, 2024, they won like Student Org of the Year. So they've definitely been doing great things. And then it was TUAP and TUAP
and SJP too as well.
Yes, SJP of course. And I wish I could have gotten in touch with them, but they were just hard to get in contact with. Sure. But we've done so much coverage on them, so I was 100%. Able to pull a pretty powerful quote from a story that Bailey did.
For sure.
Yeah, that was a huge part of it.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think were some of the most notable events of the year?
I definitely think like one of the biggest was SJP protesting at Kamala's rally, just because Kamala's rally was a huge event.
Right.
And then you had this completely different perspective from SJP, who obviously didn't agree with Kamala's stance on the situation in Gaza. And whether they agree with her on plenty of other things, it's obviously a very important humanitarian issue. And they wanted to make their voices heard. And I made sure to include in the article kind of the polarization behind that, the divisiveness. Of course, there's some of that, but had to include them because they were very active. They did a march to City Hall. I think that was last April. So, had to include them in that.
For sure. I mean, what do you think it is about Temple that makes it such an activist school? I mean, I feel like, especially in the past 2 years, starting with TUGSA specifically, it's just been movement after movement that's just been picking up pace on this campus. Yeah,
I just think it's such a diverse campus. There's so many different perspectives, so many different opinions, and a lot of outspoken opinions.
Yeah.
And people aren't afraid to make their voices heard, man, on a variety of issues. You know, this goes from battling sexual assault, fighting against sexual assault, all the way to a global issue, across the world. And there's just so many different voices, so many different kinds of people of different backgrounds. So you're going to hear people speaking on all of these different issues. And I think it's great. I especially in college. That's another thing. At that age, you have the energy for it. I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, do you think this kind of mirrors trends on college campuses across the country? Is it just, another factor of just, being the political climate that we're in and the ages that are in college? I mean, there's other factors at play too as well, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I think, like you said, like even 2023, you had the TUGSA protests. And I mean... yeah, not so much political climate for TUGSA, and I know that was 2023, but and then TUAP, because that's more of just a union. You're working to get a better contract for your workers, higher wages, better job security, all that. But what definitely is all about the political climate of not just our country but the world is the SJP stuff.
For sure.
And I think that was the most tense out of anything I mentioned, just because of, a lot of people speaking out on that issue all over the world, not just on this campus.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, tell me a bit about the results of some of these movements. And do you think their efforts and their hard work has kind of paid off in dividends, I guess?
Yeah, well, I'll start with student activism and sexual assault. I asked Ray that question, and she didn't want to take credit and say, hey, this is because of our organization. But she did feel like people more empowered to, tell their story and not shy away from that conversation.
Right.
Be more open about that conversation. And that's a great thing, just opening up a dialogue. And then you had SJP, and, there was the suspension, and there was all these things, but they brought a lot of attention to that issue.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That was their goal. And obviously there's people that disagree with their methodology and how they went about it. And, there's different opinions on that. But people obviously had a reason to be so upset and be so outspoken.
For sure.
And then TUAP, of course, they really signed this new 5-year contract with Temple, and they were able to secure a lot of those things. The only thing they weren't able to secure in that contract was the 10 days of sick leave.
Right.
But it sounds like they're going to do that on a different platform and fight for that as well.
For sure. I mean, looking kind of at the university response, have they always been, receptive to activism on campus? I know at the beginning of last semester, I believe, some kind of new guidelines for protesting on campus were released that, some argued were a little strict or targeted certain groups. But yeah, I mean, how would you analyze the university response to activism on campus?
Yeah, I mean, I think they definitely try to create an environment where that's welcomed and accepted. But I keep going back to this SJP thing, just because there's the two sides of it.
For sure. I mean, it's a divisive example. It's, we've all seen it.
So that's really where Temple they're kind of walking the line of, we want to give these students, freedom of speech and freedom of expression. But there's a certain level you can't take it to. It's like finding that balance. Yeah. You know what I mean? Obviously, they went to the Hillel Center, and, people had their opinions on that. Like, I'm not sure how opinionated I should get, but, people had their opinions on that. And I do think Temple welcomes it. There's just, finding that balance for sure.
Of course, yeah. I mean, what can we expect in the future? Do you think there's going to be even more groups and more voices heard?
I think with the guy that got sworn in yesterday, I think there will be plenty of activism.
Even on such a liberal campus, you think Trump is going to have that effect?
Yeah, like even more so than we're already seeing.
Actually, now I think about it, being yeah.
It's like already expected. I mean, we'll have to wait and see. I'm sure there's going to be things that happen that people will be getting loud about. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm sure those things will come up.
Thank you, our editors Nurbanu and Mike, for joining me on this episode, and make sure to check out all their work on the Temple News website. I'm Paulo Rocco, podcast editor for the Temple News, and you're listening to RePrint.